Assalamu alaikum. This is Margaret Hill, the Executive Director of Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative. I am so excited and honored and humbled to honor our ancestors, to be able to highlight the role of Black Muslims during Juneteenth. So we're changing our overlay here, coming with you. I have where our guests, our special guests today, are coming into our studio. So as they settle in, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance, the significance of Juneteenth in Black American culture and Black American Muslim culture specifically. I'm also going to introduce like who do we have on our team. They have a lot to share. And so, Juneteenth, this is really like a special day. There's sometimes a misnomer that this is a day about the Emancipation Proclamation, but actually, the Emancipation Proclamation had actually happened 3 years before. So, this significance for the day is that. 3 years after President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which really freed the enslaved folks in the Confederacy. And there were many that weren't freed at that time. But 3 years after that, Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Armory finally brought news to Galveston, Texas, to the enslaved folks there on June 19th, to let them know that they were liberated from slavery. So this day has a special place in a history for African Americans. Typically, like I grew up celebrating it. It was kind of like that first day of summer, right before the summer solstice, where in the town that I grew up in, we'd have lots of barbecues. There was out festivals and celebration of Black American culture, and we bought our first summer fit. So we know like this day is more than just a picnic, more, but this commemoration is really significant for all of us as we think about Freedom Day, around liberation, around Jubilee, around the struggles of African Americans, Black Americans, and what we could learn about that. So today, um, we have our board president, Imam Jahari Abdul Malik. We have Layla Abdullapoulos, and we also have another board member, John Austin Yoshino, who will be sharing. So let us kind of come in. I want to make sure we get Imam Jahari on stage. Is your camera working? Let's see. We have him in the backstage, and we see if we could try to pull him up. If not, let us know if we could hear you. And so we'll try to get this going. We're going through some of the kinks of and the beauties and the wonders of doing this work from online. There's always going to be some technical challenges, but alhamdulillah, like through the technology, we're able to connect with some amazing folks. So let's go. We'll try to bring him up. Here we go. Imam Jahari, we got to get your other side of your screen. Here you go. He's coming back in. So thank you all for joining us, and I will just kind of be able to chat a little bit about the work. Layla, assalamu alaikum. How
Yes.
are you doing?
Walaikum assalam.
This is
I'm doing well, alhamdulillah. I'm trying to get the most that I can out of today with reflecting on what the day means as far as my ancestry, as far as where we've come as a people from Juneteenth. And so I'm really kind of like using that opportunity for the day.
Thank you. I mean, it's really healing to have my people here in this space
Mhm.
and to be able to spotlight and share. I'm just really excited to see our followers like find getting to know our team. So yeah, Imam Jahari, can you just kind of ground us in this moment, around the spiritual, the religious, faith-based significance You are always grounding us and guiding us with those important reminders about the importance of our work and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our niyyah, our intentions around this work.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As the rappers used to say, my mic sound nice? Can you hear me now?
You sure can.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. You know, I'm struck in this particular moment where we are seeing really in a time where it looks like the world is on fire, where racism is being raised to new heights, not only in the United States, but in many countries around the world, Europe. When we look at the genocide in Gaza, the time that we're living in right now really allows people to be in a space to say, okay, I can feel on this Juneteenth what slavery and the realization that slavery was wrong, that the degradation of people, that the power of one group of people to oppress another. Maybe if it was Juneteenth at another time, we might not have that kind of resonance. But right now, people have that resonance. They have a collective feeling of saying, we can't sit by and wait when people are freed by fiat, but it will take years for them to get the news to feel the benefits of freedom. How long will the crisis in Gaza continue until they get their freedom? So this is a really pivotal time. People looking in America around the issue of the Trump movement that's really is emblematic of wanting to take people back into slavery. And so it is really for us a palpable moment where people can say, oh my God, I thought we had made progress. Are we still back to 1865, 66, 67, 68, 18, not 19? The reality of those circumstances are hitting people in their faces. And that means not only people of color, but white people saying, how could I sit by and watch that degradation then when I have to sit and live through it now? What does allyship look like in the current crisis? So this is really a very, very, very critical time for us to have an opportunity to dismantle racism. And we see its pernicious impacts around the world. And now a great feeling that if we don't do something about it, what kind of world would we leave for our children, not in the future, next year, next month? So, alhamdulillah. And I believe it by the mercy of Allah. I didn't go to one protest, one march. I didn't mobilize and work with people to put pressure on Congress and the business community to recognize Juneteenth. It seemed to happen almost on its own after we as a people have been celebrating it for hundreds of years. So, alhamdulillah, almost 100 years. So I'm with you that, alhamdulillah, it is a pivotal time and a great opportunity to move humanity forward.
You're on mute, Margaret.
It is a great opportunity for us to move humanity forward.
Thank you. I mean, thank you so much for grounding us.
As much as we don't like it,
Mhm.
right? We definitely don't like this discomfort. But there are people who are standing up, who are speaking up, who are putting money together this Juneteenth because they can't stand it anymore.
Thank you so much. And having this as a federal holiday, while significant, right? And there are some unintended consequences of this. A lot of the Black workers, like they don't have today off. Like they don't have those same rights. And so as we think about this celebration, in the middle of the week, like it's and how our days, right? Our days where we created safe spaces, healing spaces,
Mm.
that we celebrated it before it was commercialized. And now there are people that are taking this time off, right? And they're not honoring the Black freedom struggle that went into that. So we have John J. Austin Yoshino. Can you thank you for joining us. I want you to talk a little bit about Juneteenth, about how this connects to global. You tend to do really great around these global issues, around workers' issues. Can you kind of share some more of your perspectives of what we should be thinking about during this Juneteenth?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for the invite. I'm honored to be here, Marjorie. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum, Layla. So it's good to see everyone. Imam Johari. It's a fantastic to be here in the studio and in community with you all on this glorious day. As Imam Johari mentioned, this was something that was born out of our collective desire to celebrate our liberation, our emancipation. Someone said on Twitter earlier today, Lincoln was anti-black. Black folks freed themselves, right? And the truth is that like it's not even just that we freed ourselves. We are in this perpetuous state. We're constantly freeing ourselves. We're constantly creating spaces. We're constantly creating things. We're constantly blazing a trail for other people to find their path to liberation. So I feel like we need to be, we need to give everybody their props today. So, but on the international sense, sorry, I have this really problematic button, so give me like 1 second. I don't want to be immodest here. But I was on the global scale. One of the things that people seem to think is that civil rights and protest and those sorts of things were born in the 60s. They were born with MLK. They were born with Malcolm X. And the truth is they weren't. They were born actually I mean, if you were to go back diasporically to like Haiti, yeah, 19th century. But even just the global element, which started in the late 19th, well, let's say right after the Civil War, late 19th century. And we were connected to we saw the struggles going on with our brothers and sisters in Africa and Asia at that time, and we reached out. We initially took an example from those, emulated them in some respects, and vice versa. But then when you get into the 20th century, around the 30s and the 40s, we actually started building those bridges with those communities. Starting with apartheid South Africa, eventually, moving into the 50s and 60s and 70s. Right, and that's when it sort of drops off a little bit because we know what happened in the 60s and 70s, right? We had COINTELPRO, but you had the Black Panther Party and SNCC who were forming student organizations. They were going to Algeria. They were meeting with people in Cairo, and they were forming those global bonds of solidarity. And let's not forget that a lot of these people were influenced very heavily. Like you look at Du Bois, excuse me. You look at those. At those people that were influenced by Marcus Garvey, right? His whole thing was the title of his organization was International, right? So that was, that all culminated in the 60s and 70s where there were protests and there were demands for equal rights and civil rights and immigration reform, and I think that that's something that we really need to get back to because we're in this place now where everybody is hurting so much. They're under this boot so intensely that they we all have this tendency to retreat into safety, to our own groups. What we should be doing is joining hands, right? We should be talking to people in Algeria again. We should be talking to people in West Sahara. We should be talking to people in Palestine. We should be talking to people in, in all of these places, and seeing how we can support each other, mutual aid, mutual defense.
I really appreciate that.
No, John, you just reminded me, if we look back at the UNIA and African Community Leagues, their conference held, I think this is like 1916, international conference, is raising those international issues about the condition of Black and brown people in the United States, in the Caribbean, in Africa, at a global conference. And this is only, a decade or so out of slavery. But the movement was universalized. That they called it the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Universal. Not American, not Caribbean, not African.
I want to take the opportunity to also remember Walter Rodney, right, whose birthday just passed a couple days ago. Absolutely dynamic, brilliant Caribbean thinker. I had to mention that real quick, so I kind of blew past him. But yes, thank you, Imam Johari. That's like a fantastic, explanation of what I was trying to say.
And by the way, if you read Tony Martin's book, Race First,
we lost Imam Johari, but he'll be back. I mean, I really love bringing up these historical references. And really one of the other highlights I wanted to really connect was that sometimes that people, the perspective of like Muslim Americans or even like Muslims globally, right, is the erasure of Black Muslims. There have always been Black Muslims, right, from the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that was also part of the liberation struggle, right? Like when we think about that, and that's why the anti-racism ethos came in, right? Like of the last sermon, right, of addressing the kind of the perspectives as far as like the kind of the racial hierarchies and however they were defining identity or difference, but where you had like Bilal or other folks of the African diaspora and how they were seen, that they were Black Arabs, and that there were people who had enslaved status. And so that Islam came as within a kind of liberatory vein, and that Black Muslims had engaged in liberation struggles, and that the first Muslims, when they were oppressed, where did they go? They went to Abyssinia in their first hijrah, in their first immigration. So that's where they sought solace and solitude. And so Islam has always been an African religion. And in fact, when we think about like what was the impetus of the transatlantic slave trade, so as a historian, this was something that has been significant for me, of looking at the history of like pre-modern world, and that when you see the kind of formations of white supremacy, that the anti-Muslim, the Orientalism that played a part in the ethnic cleansing of the Iberian Peninsula, which pushed out the Jews, the Sephardic Jews, so that's where they come from, and the Moors, that was actually the impetus of the transatlantic slave trade, right? Like that the doctrine of discovery, which was very like the enemies of Christ, the Saracens, which are like a racialized terms for Moors, and pagans. Like these were people that were considered humans that you could enslave, take their land, and to engage in perpetual warfare. So this doctrine of discovery is the driver of white supremacy as we come to know that in the modern world. And so that there were Africans, our ancestors were both on the Iberian Peninsula, but then they were caught up in the transatlantic slave trade, that the first Muslims were these Africans in the United States. The first Muslims in the United States were these Africans that were kidnapped and trafficked and forced into bondage, and separated and alienated from their faith identity. And many of us, like myself, like I embraced Islam as a young adult. I embrace that as embracing part of that identity, which was an identity that is beyond white supremacy. So, when we think about American Muslims, African American Muslims, Juneteenth is something that is significant given that our struggles, right, with enslavement, within liberation, we have always been in uprisings in the Caribbean, South America, in the Americas, places like Sapelo Island, where we maintained our identity. So, and part of like embracing who we are has always been embracing our Muslim identity and all the rich faith traditions of that are in Africa, which includes Christianity, animist faiths. And now we have like such a diversity of Black religions. So it's important that Juneteenth does honor the diversity of Black faith. So Imam Jahari, thank you for coming back. And I want you to kind of, really...
Well, I have two things that I want to posit for our conversation, most urgently. The one that for me is compelling is that when we look at the phenomenon, and I'd really prefer to talk about this later, but I don't want to forget how the system delays providing information to its people about the truth. And so America has a history of providing you the information, sometimes not years, but decades after. So we find out about Tuskegee after. You say, oh my God, that happened, right? Oh, the cell line that is taken from our sister, who everyone uses now in genetic development of drugs and so on. And you say, how this country has a history of telling the truth, but way past the time when they've done their dirt. The other part of this, for me, is that when we look at our condition as people of faith, that June.
I am.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. For us, the idea that as a people, we were robbed of our own traditions. And it's only by taking days like this day, and it won't be anybody else but us who will save us, that whatever the vestiges of our culture that we hold on to, it will be us who will have it and then have to teach the rest of America. So the fact that it's commercialized is not a problem for me. That's what capitalist systems do. It is how do we take back, I think in the Obama era, we talked about the King holiday as a day on, not a day off. We have to do that for ourselves. And so in the remembrance of Juneteenth, it is that we have to own it. Jews fully own the Holocaust, even as much as other people may talk about it, but they lead their own struggle and they interpret their own struggle through their own lens. And Black people, African people in America, we have the same obligation to do it. I'm going to borrow something. I just came back from the Gambia, and they were serving a particular food for breakfast. And I recognized, I said, this is a characteristic food of Black people in America. Black-eyed peas. It's called yebe. Yebe, they serve it for breakfast. I said, subhanAllah, that's what we eat it for dinner. But the tradition of black-eyed peas, we brought eating black-eyed peas, we brought with us, and then internalized that to be a dish that we eat on New Year's Day. We have to lead our own struggle. And other people, whether they follow or not, that's up to them, right? St. Patrick's Day, I wear green sometimes. It's because the Irish lead their remembrance. We have to lead our own.
Definitely honoring. Layla, I want you to be able to chime in. Like, you are part of and essential in this conversation as you have laid the foundations for MuslimARC's curriculum going back to in 2016 on our race identity series. You've helped really, hold us all accountable in our work to countering anti-Blackness and how we internalize that as an institution. So I want to make sure we hear your perspective on Juneteenth and on this moment.
Well, I think that the day, the idea of Juneteenth itself, and the fact that what it represents. It represents us finding out finally, because it took so long. It took years for every enslaved person to find out in the country that they had been emancipated. So it wasn't a matter of as soon as Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, then it was like, oh, everyone's free and that's it. There was definitely a struggle for everyone to find out about it. And then also on top of that, the systems that were put in place after emancipation to have us African American people continue to be enslaved by any other name. Okay, whether it was the convict lease system, whether it was Black Code's convict lease system, any way that to keep Black people oppressed and in any kind of involuntary servitude in the society any way possible. And the fact that African Americans have struggled and made leaps and bounds in over time when it comes to their liberation. But in addition to that, not solely concentrate on their liberation. So it's one of the unique things that African Americans have the tendency to do is we can walk and chew gum when it comes to liberation and speaking out against oppression, meaning that when you look at Black Muslims and you look at Malcolm X, for example, he spoke about the oppression that not only African Americans face, but also the oppression of other peoples globally. So it wasn't a matter of just focusing and on just the African American plight. He was someone that engaged in true solidarity. And that's something that African Americans have been able to do, whether you're talking about the women's rights movement, whether you're talking about the labor movement, whether you're talking about even today when it comes to what's happening, the genocide in Gaza, Palestine, Sudan, the Congo, what's happening in Haiti. It's a matter of being able to do that and engage in true solidarity that that makes the African American experience and liberation so significant. And even looking now at Juneteenth, expecting that those lines of solidarity are not one way as they historically have been. So when I think about my fellow Muslims who are definitely need to center in some ways the plights of Muslims that are going on and non-Muslims that are going on globally, but also to look and appreciate the position that African Americans play and Black African American Muslims played a significant role that we have when it comes to liberation across the board here in the United States and globally.
Oh, but by the way, I wanted to posit something. And I think we have the opportunity to change some of our nomenclature. Because I hear people using the term white supremacy as if somehow or other the supremacy of whiteness could ever be a real thing. And so I haven't come up with any way of some phraseology, whether it's a false supremacy, whether it's a pseudo supremacy, but there's nothing really supreme about it. And so greater minds than my own, I think, need to come up with a new framing, because saying white supremacy, just like people referring to enslaved Africans as slaves, creates a frame. We were prisoners of war.
Definitely.
During enslavement. We were in bondage. We were in involuntary servitude. But the human spirit, we were not objects. We were not slaves. And by the same token, today, many people's minds are enslaved by the construct white supremacy. So I think it's time for some new phraseology that speaks the truth.
Well, we can definitely workshop that, right? Like that's the kind of thought leadership, the kind of things that we do as we think about the language and the framing. You know, a lot of the terms, you know, like Layla is a language specialist, so like her linguistic analysis is really good. You know, she'll call me on things and kind of really push that analysis, and we'll continue to do that work, right? Thinking about the nomenclature, like thinking about like even the broader aspect of ethno-nationalism. So like in different places, right, this may look a certain way, but we know like within South Africa that they really did, you know, they drew from United States, right? Like in the Jim Crow to establish a whites only rule and white supremacy, right? And the similar thing, the Pied Noir in Algeria. And that's where you had like Frantz Fanon, who worked with the Algerians in their liberation from the Pied Noir, who tried to establish that kind of white supremacy. Well, you have in other places white Han supremacy or Hindutva, like they may have their movements, they may call it different names, right? And this is what we're facing with. And now they're trying to criminalize when we're critiquing one particular country of like really trying to reenact this kind of asabiya, right? This ethno-religious nationalism at the detriment of the Palestinian people, instead of creating a society, a country that is free and liberated for all people, right? That they're justifying, right, this brutality. And so for those of us who've come up in that time, like growing up during the apartheid movement, anti-apartheid movement, my brother was born at the end of Jim Crow in 1968. So like like my grandparents were impacted by Jim Crow. My mother also, they faced segregation. And just the danger, the kind of actions that they expect us to have, right, as Black people. This is what got Trayvon, like Zimmerman felt like he could just attack, right, a young Black male, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. And that since Trayvon Martin was in Florida, he was supposed to just kowtow to a white presenting Latino and just say, oh, who was interrogating him, and not to defend himself. And then, we see how that was politicized. But if it was not for the actions of solidarity, right, you have like some people like, one person who I greatly admire, Ahmed Abu Zaid, who now he leads one of the largest Palestinian American organizations, but he co-founded Dream Defenders, and they worked to organize to try to bring George Zimmerman to justice, to bring issue, like they really raised awareness about this man was able to walk away after murdering this boy, this young man. He was a child, right? So these are the kind of things when we look at the rates of Black death, Black mortality, what they expect us to do, and not being able to live as like full citizens and enjoy our rights and privileges in this country. They are arresting Black immigrants, deporting Black immigrants, right? And then globally exploiting Africa, right? We know like that there are many Black folks who aren't free within our criminal justice system. So many of the products that people are having, we have people that are coming out, dying, putting out fires in the Southwest, in California. That is slave labor. We also know within mines in Congo, within the extraction of resources in Africa, within the kafala system that we see in the Middle East, right? Like that African labor is being exploited in the Middle East and in Asia and in the Caribbean and Central South America and in America. So we have slavery that still exists. It is just morphed in a way that in every generation that we find acceptable. And it is our duty to work towards liberating not just our own people, but when we liberate our people, we uplift everybody else. It's like what I know you've said, it's like when we raise the tide and then all the boats are lifted. This is the importance. This is why Juneteenth for me matters, that in the liberation of the enslaved Black folks, that that not only inspired, but that opened the doors for other folks, whether it's birthright, where when you're born here and within these borders, that everybody gets a chance to become, is considered a citizen. So the rights that we've won open the doors for other folks. And that's like, we have to continue that, because our liberation is not predicated on being superior or having some supremacy, but really in the collective liberation. I'll let John, I feel like John, you have some important stuff to say, to chime in on. So please do.
You kind of caught me on my back foot. No, I mean, the thing is that you know how I am about collective liberation, and because I was talking with Yangwei about this actually earlier, because we were talking about the reading list. We were talking about Walter Rodney. We were talking about Aimé Césaire, Frantz Fanon, Cedric Robinson. And I was talking about how, we need to sort of start building, and when I say talking, I wasn't talking at him, because he knows what's up, right? He knows what has to happen. And we have to sort of get away from things like prosperity gospel, and we have to start talking about collective liberation. We have to start talking about, instead of talking about making money, let's talk about taking care of our neighbor, start talking our families, each other's families, right? And I was saying, like, that's one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with food security, right? Not just because it's one of the things that affects African Americans the most disproportionately in this country. It's food security, right? There are 10 million children who are food insecure. 2/3 of those, 3/4 of those are Black children. Many Black families and Black children live in food deserts, right? And I'll give you a really interesting example of this. I went to a place in Indiana that was a small town, majority Black, and it was a food desert. They only had one corner store for the whole town. That town is literally surrounded by thousands of acres of corn, potatoes, beans, soy, everything, right? How can you call that a food desert, right? Of course you call it a food desert. So it's one of the reasons why I'm fascinated by that, not only because of the implications nutritionally and equity, and in terms of equity. I'm fascinated by it also because, what is Juneteenth? We have barbecues, and if we don't need Juneteenth to have barbecues, we do have Juneteenth barbecues, right? Food assurance, food security means coming together with your communities, coming together with your families, sharing things that you cook, sharing things you prepared, cutting up, right? Having a good time, right? Sharing stories over a meal. Like, that's why I'm obsessed with it, right? Because to me, food is, aside from that fact that I love food, I really love food. To me, it's nothing symbolizes community more, right? I was also making some food for my grandmother a couple nights ago. I cook meals for her a lot because she has a neurodegenerative illness, and I feel like the food keeps her connected to the rest of us, right? Like, so I started cooking all this food from when, food that she hasn't had since she's been in the United States, which has been, over 70 years. 75 years she's been in this country, 72 years. And to see her taste something that she hasn't tasted in 70 years and like watch her face light up, like, oh my, like, I remember this, and then she starts talking. She doesn't talk very much, right? Then she starts talking about the last time she had this. I was 16 years old, and like, anyway, so that's like, I kind of went from this collective liberation thing to this food thing, but to me, they're all interrelated. They're all interconnected, right? And even when we start doing the things that we know we're gonna have to do at some point, which is more protests, more boycotts, more things like that. You know, we're gonna have to look out for each other. We're gonna have to make sure that everybody who's participating has food. Everybody who has lost their job, right, because they spoke up for the right thing. Got to make sure that that person got a potluck, right? You got to bring a plate by, right, for the family. So, that's where I'm gonna leave that thought.
Layla, I feel like you have some like little injuries or something, some little sparks, little bubbling up, little ideas.
If I may, I'd like, um, Layla, with your permission,
Of
uh,
course.
to remind people that, um, if you want to be engaged in the uh, systematics, the informatics, the organizing around dismantling racism, then you should go to our website, MuslimARC.org, and join us. If you like this kind of discourse, follow us on Instagram. If you become a member, many of the books that um, have been mentioned, the historical events um, that John and Layla have talked about, um, are embedded in our anti-racism training, with the analysis of a Muslim lens.
Mm.
So I invite you to join us in this movement. The reason that people didn't find out that they were free for years was because it was systematically suppressed. And so to dismantle racism is going to take a systematic approach, and that's what MuslimARC is providing.
That is a perfect segue for Layla to actually talk about, and I just kind of dropped in a little banner, like the Footsteps of Hajar campaign, because in doing this work, when we really think about like some of the people, the Hujaj, like are the folks that went on Hajj, right? And we just had that program, the Footsteps of Hajar, Muslim Women's Leadership. And it was very beautiful to see Afro Latinas, Black Muslimas, like actually talk like with the liberation theology of Black Muslim women and the history, like Hajar, who was a Black woman, right, who was sent out into the wilderness, and the miracle of the Zemzem water, but she was trying to save the life of her son, right? And her son ends up becoming the father of the Arabs, right? Like this is the founder, right? Like kind of like when we think about what were the roots of Islam in Arabia at that time. So, this kind of Black history of Islam is often missing, right? Islam becomes whitewashed throughout history where we don't even know like the historical figures who are Black, the people in the Quran who are mentioned who were Black, the Sahabi who were Black, right? And so these are things that are very important because we tend to see a certain phenotype as being representative of Muslims or who Arabs are, and it's like knowing that you have like that diversity that transcends race, right, that exists, and that also that there were many folks in uplift movements. So I would say for anybody that's interested in Black history, read about the Zanj Rebellion, right? Read about Hajj Umar Tal, right? Read about like even the certain conquests, even the certain defeats that may be like challenging. Read about Amadou Bamba, right? Like so there were scholars that were critiquing the anti-Blackness in their societies in North Africa. And so these are kind of things that are important. I mean, I look forward to providing that type of programming, workshops, trainings, lectures. But Layla, you have a lot to share, so I'm gonna have you take it over.
Well, you reminded me of when the footsteps of Hajar. One of the things that one of the our guests said, Halima de la Vera, was that she gets inspiration from Hajar, and one of the things that she said was that when Hajar was left in the desert by the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, she knew she had to do something. When the enslaved Africans here in the United States learned of their emancipation, they knew they had to do something. They had choices to make, they had decisions to make. And throughout our history as a people, that is something that has always happened, where we know we had to do something. When you and Namira Islam came together, you knew you had to do something about the racism in American Muslim communities, and globally, the anti-blackness, the underappreciation of the Black Muslim experience by non-Black Muslims. And so we have MuslimARC. And you knew you had to do something. There needed to be education. And so we have our wonderful programs. We have our training, and we make those connections through our training about the layers of anti-Blackness, Islamophobia, systemic oppression of people. We're able to make those connections and educate Muslims, non-Muslims, Blacks, non-Blacks, people of different, very diverse backgrounds and ethnicities and experiences about how these systems work, about how they impact us. And so it's something wonderful that we're able to do. We're able to offer that education through our training, but also through our programming. We have a lot of great programs like this. We have a lot of, we do our lives, we have our webinars, and we also have intensive trainings like our Detroit anti-racism training, which I'm trying to get to New York. I want to get it to New York. I want to do New York anti-racism training. And also through one of the things that we're doing in Southern California is our symposium, where we have an opportunity, people have an opportunity to register and engage in some very, very important exchange of ideas and knowledge, learning tool sets of becoming more comprehensive and productive practitioners, educators, advocates, and activists. I mean, this is a really great opportunity to network, to learn about philanthropy, and having your initiative or your organization or your program engage in partnerships and collaborations. And so it's really something that is very important. And I'm so glad that we're having it in Southern California in September, and people can register for it. There's an early bird right now, and they can register for it at www.muslimarc.org/ARC symposium. It's right there. It's going by you right now. And so it's just really an important event that kind of shows what it is that we do at MuslimARC, is that in addition to educating, it's about forming lines of solidarity, partnership, and collaboration that is so important for organizations, for individual activists, for individual educators to engage in the work and move their work forward.
Thank you so much, Layla. That was so beautiful. I mean, you can see I was like trying to hold, because like I ugly cry, and once it stops, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna mess up my makeup. Oh, it's gonna be a hot mess. But it's very, when we first founded Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative, I received an email from a newly minted, she just passed the bar, a Bangladeshi American Muslim woman. And she's had this email that she sent out to all 20 Muslim leaders. And it was a few Muslim women where we were just like, there's like Hen Meki, who's Sudanese American, Diala Khalifa, who's Lebanese American, and now Dr. Maythel Hassan, who she did some interviews. We did some work on food security, but also on some of the challenges of Muslim-owned liquor stores in the inner city. So really, like, that was going back to 2006 of food justice and some of the complicity that Muslims had, that non-Black Muslims had in economic exploitation, right, in inner cities. So Maytha, we had this long relationship. A group of us women, we thought we were just doing an initiative. We're going to do it during Black History Month, being Black and Muslim, drop the A word, because we know, like, even tied to Juneteenth. And I had learned this from traveling abroad, but I remember the first time where I was actually called this was a slave, like, besides elementary school, where I was made fun of for being a slave. Like, the students would like call me slave. And then when I went to Kuwait, a young boy called us called us slaves. And then when I taught in an inner city Islamic school where half the students were Palestinian American, half were African American, and I saw those tensions that were happening. And I remembered as a young girl how alienated I felt, and those little boys that called me slave, those weren't my brothers, even though we shared the same religion, because at that time I grew up Christian, and that was not the experience that I wanted for my daughter or any other Muslim child, was to grow up feeling alienated and knowing that Islamophobia was so rampant in the society that we as a ummah, as a community, could not afford to have this happen again. So when I got that email from her, I had already started developing curriculum. And I was like, look, we're going to develop curriculum. We're going to do this hashtag conversation. And it was a needs assessment when it went viral. From there, and this was, these conversations started, this was like about, now it's 11 years. But like, we founded, MuslimARC was founded 10 years ago with that launching of the hashtag. And we officially became incorporated as a nonprofit, and that we got our application in 2025. So technically, even though we've been around for 10 years, by 2025 will be our official nonprofit 10 years. Is what we found was and we decided to create education campaigns, not just call out people, because that's always fun. I like to fight. I'm a little scrappy.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a scrappy one. I always have been. But instead to educate. And our goal is really to educate communities so that they can have the tools to counter that, to train their children to do better. So we're creating those education resources to build lines of solidarity. It's chicken and the egg. We're training the adults, we're training the children, and we're creating places where we can understand, where African Americans can understand, right, the plight of folks who are immigrants, can understand global issues, that Black Muslims are America's transnational consciousness. Like, we are not just local, we're global, and we care about all issues. Like you said, we can walk and chew gum. So, I mean, I'm just really, thank you for bringing up that, like how we started, because it was all on solidarity. And, like, we are calling on our allies to show up and step up during this moment. We have to take this time during the summer, not just to cultivate a strong analysis, but to build those strong relationships so that we can survive the onslaught. Because they're coming, like our adversaries, people who don't want us to be free, they are organizing, right? They're organizing
Project 2025.
2020. So we have to do this work, and we will create the spaces for us to develop strategies, develop our strength, and we can do it out in the open. There's no secret, like, we'll be secure because we have John, who, is very, knows that that's important, operational security. But there's some things we'll just be upfront and blatant about it. It's like, we know that a world where everybody belongs is a stronger society, right? We know when everybody's free, that we're all free, and that there is no supremacy when you have to dominate and try to control other people. You are never free doing that. So we're here to liberate the oppressed and the oppressor from those binaries and those bonds. And so, that's why even doing, another important program, we have to have a radical imagination. And something, John, can you talk a little bit about the fellowship that we have?
Well, we have an SFWA, Science Fiction Writers Association of America, It's sponsored. We got some grant money from SFWA. We are hosting the first ever dark matter science fiction um, fellowship, and it is a fellowship that is dedicated to, I'm a science fiction writer, and I'm a science fiction fan, and one of the things that I really want to help people, I feel like we live in a time right now where technology and imagination are converging. And because of that, there's this potential for a lot of really great things to happen, but there's also potential for it to really, really, really go sideways. There's a lot of surveillance technology. There's a lot of, we're seeing lots of things like drone technology being used, for example, in Palestine. And one of the things, it's been weaponized. And one of the things that I want to sort of help people do is begin to imagine futures that are rooted in those kinds of things, where they can look and critically analyze how technology can be used either for good or for evil. But most importantly, I want people to understand how marginalized communities are always the ones that are most and first impacted by those kinds of technologies. And so that the Dark Matter Fellowship is designed to bring a few young up and coming writers to SoCal, Southern California, and we're gonna have some discussions, and we're gonna talk, and we're gonna exchange ideas about how we can write our way into a more liberated future, a less constrained, less surveilled uh, future.
Beautiful. Thank you. Layla.
Yeah. We also have our misogynisa coming up, where a very excellent collaborative event that is going to be an educational platform to learn about the ways that Muslim women are impacted by ethno-nationalism, Islamophobia, racism, and sexism. So it's going to be really fabulous and spectacular. I can't wait for that one either.
Really, really excited. So coming forward, we will start some of our trainers will be online offering our anti-racism competency webinars, our critical Islamophobia webinars, but we'll be doing this stuff on the ground in Southern California, in New York. But also, if you are in other cities, you can bring some of our trainers out. We do come out to where you're at. We will start to, and as we get stronger, like we've had fellowships to train the trainer programs. We offer certification because we do have, kind of like we've definitely raised the bar on what does it mean to be an anti-racism trainer? Like, what do you
Absolutely.
need to know? What are the kind of skills that you walk away with? So we will be offering those things within, the next year. But definitely, follow us, sign up for our newsletter to stay abreast of our programming, those that we offer for free. Some of them we do have some sliding scales. We don't turn away anybody based on finances, but do let us know. But it does help, to do movement work, you got to raise the funding. We got to do the income redistribution. We need your support to do this work. And so I'm just going to kind of drop that in. If we're going to follow the footsteps of Hajar, right? Her seeking the sustenance, seeking water for her child has laid down the foundations of the Hajj rituals. And so there have millions of people go there every year to follow these kind of rituals of a woman who was by herself. She was not considered, the highest and the most important person in that society, but understanding the reliance upon Allah, and that being an immigrant, being an outsider, these are things that are very significant. We hope that you donate within that spirit, right? And that you help us sustain this long work. I know we're gonna, like, before we close out, Imam Jahari, can you just close us out with a closing prayer? If you have a moment. You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulil Kareem. I just want to, in this moment, on June 19th, really to help us be grounded in a sense of time and space. And you know, one of the things about science fiction writers often, as I was listening to John saying, science fiction writers take us and project us into a future time and space often, and gives us an opportunity to assess what are the characteristics of today that will manifest a new future. And so as we look at the world today, looking back at the historical moment of Juneteenth, for hundreds of thousands of people who are living under a false pretense of what the rules and laws of the society were. That now in our moment, how do we create that time and space that in a future world that we are creating, we're creating it now, that we will be the ones who will set the beacon forward for a society that we would want to be the future. And the warning that comes from our writers and thinkers, that if we don't make certain changes today, we will live in a post-apocalyptic world, a world not worthy to have passed on. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us to be people like the family of Ibrahim, that with their faith and with their conviction, they established a society that was built on the sharing of those resources. We ask Allah to make us like our mother Hagar. She shared the water of that well of Zemzem that gave sustenance not just to herself, but to provide the sustenance for the people who lived in that community. To be like the family of Ibrahim, where that father, Ibrahim, and his son worked to build a foundation of a place of worship that would call all of humanity together under the covenant that was set between human beings and their creator, that we would answer Allah's call, answer God's call to establish justice in our world, that Allah would reward us with peace and justice in the hereafter. With that, I close by asking Allah's peace and blessings on all of you, that Allah raise us in ranks of righteousness and justice, and that Allah might make us successful in all of those things in this life and in the hereafter. Ameen.
Ameen. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.